Sinister Wisdom 127 on transfer is an incredible special issue of the journal that takes up ideas really important, not only to me, but I think broadly to the Sinister Wisdom community, which is how do we transfer knowledge, information, experiences, and other things that are vital to us and in community connections across generations, across people, across differences. This evening, we have a series of readings from and a roundtable conversation about the issue. I am now going to turn the program over to the editor of this special issue, the incomparable Susannah Magers. Please join me in welcoming Susannah and celebrating her incredible work on the issue.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thanks to everyone at Sinister Wisdom who works so hard behind the scenes to make this all possible. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to celebrate with everyone tonight. Thanks for being here. I also want to say thank you to all of the contributors to On Transfer, our featured speakers for this event, and to the front cover artist, Lukaza Branfman-Verissimo, whose incredible artwork is on the cover here. Thank you so much. I wanted to start with talking about why a special issue on the topic of transfer. And I'm going to just read directly from the intro that I wrote. You can read the full version in the issue itself. I began to envision this issue in the spring of 2017 at a personal and professional crossroads. And again, you can read more about it in the issue itself, but the short version, I was burnt out, demoralized, and wondering if I should keep going with my pursuit of a creative career as an arts curator, writer, and organizer. During this time, I was reevaluating everything. It was also at this time that I discovered Sinister Wisdom, and I felt a renewed sense of belonging and purpose. Receiving the news that the journal's archives were recently transferred from the Bay Area of California to Florida, a literal transfer, I began a conversation with Julie on the conceptual framework and potential of transferring. I was fascinated by the fact that the journal would move to wherever the current editor called home. And during this time, I also started the journal's Instagram account, sharing highlights from past issues, celebrating independent bookstores that carried the journal, and spreading word about the community. In her 2005 Notes for a Magazine for Sinister Wisdom 64, Lesbians in Music, Drama, and Art, former Sinister Wisdom editor Fran Day writes, "The pieces in this issue frame important questions about the political potential of the visual and performing arts to inspire us as individuals and to change the world. Inspired by Day's words, and with an emphasis on interviews and creative practice, On Transfer pays specific attention to the idea of intentional transfer as an essential component in building community. The writing, art, and interviews in this issue represent specific moments in transfer, some over a year, others a lifetime. Snapshots of collaborations, records of relationships, reconsiderations of impacts, being in the throes of transformation and coming out on the other side, personal and professional journeys, triumphs, and failures. The projects, dreams, calls to action, and conversations here represent stages in a process. While written years ago, the call for submissions remains, for me, relevant as ever, as we continue to show up, be visible, push against, and shape our communities and a world we want to live in. What do we pass on or transfer to each other? And how do we connect with, motivate, and inspire, especially in times like these? What are the ways in which we can shift and change along the way? And what lessons have we learned, unlearned, or are in the process of revisiting? This project, like our lives, has been through many stages of transfer over the past 5 years, including a global pandemic. Thank you to all of the contributors who gave their time, spirit, and energy and share their creative visions and notions of transfer with me. To Lukaza for gracing the cover with her incredible artwork that reminds us that we and our stories are important and should be prioritized. And a huge thank you to Julie for her patience and guidance as I push through blocks of every shape and size to get this issue finished and out in the world. Let's keep transferring, listening to our stories, learning from, and showing up for each other. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Mev Miller. I'm really excited to introduce Mev. Mev has lived in lesbian communities in Detroit, New Haven, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and now Rhode Island. Mev is a gardener, writer, editor, photographer, teacher, organizer, activist, collector of lesbian publications, and a singer. As lesbrarian and instigator, Mev is actively working to establish Wanderground Lesbian Archive and Library. Mev's going to read an excerpt from her piece about the process of forming a nonprofit, Lesbian Library and Archive, Wanderground, from her own personal collection, and we'll share how to get involved. Take it away, Mev.
Thanks, Susannah. And it's really been a pleasure for me to be part of this issue. I'm really excited that it's now out and we all get the chance to talk to everybody about it. So I'm going to read a few snippets from my article, so to give you a little heads up about the beginning of it and then go from there. In the beginning of my article, I write about how I came to be a collector of books and lesbiana. I discuss how the collection has evolved, describe what I possess, and ponder what to do with it all. I will read some selections and talk about what's happening now. After 40 plus years of collecting thousands of books, what remains is an extensive library of lesbian, feminist, and women's studies books, all genres on many subjects. In fact, easily 95% of my remaining library contains volumes written by, for, or about lesbians or women. My obsession blossomed not only by my personal interests, but also through my 25 plus years as a professional in the feminist and independent press book industry and the women in print movement. I'll fancy myself as a lesbrarian, a book collector, archivist, and holder guardian of hundreds of published volumes of lesbian words and ideas. And here's the dilemma. As each year passes more quickly and I advance into my late 60s, I ponder and worry about how to care for these treasures going forward. The thought of yes?
We're getting a lot of feedback all of a sudden on your audio. Is there something that you might be able to do?
I'm sorry, no, this seems to be an ongoing problem that I haven't been able to fix.
Okay, then carry on.
Okay, I'll try. It sometimes goes away, so hopefully it will go away. The thought of transferring these numerous books, journals, newspapers, pamphlets, posters, CDs, tapes, movies, letters, photos, buttons, cards, and other reality creates discomfort for me. They are priceless and invaluable to me, a collection overflowing with historical meaning, purpose, and identity. I wonder who would care about them. All of it represents my life as a lesbian. Will others regard this library as a worthy treasure, or will it be the stuff to create an enormous bonfire to burn heretic witches with their heretic ideas? As I search for a positive, happy ending for them, a somewhat permanent transfer station, my thoughts and emotions about what to do trip and spiral over and over in anxiety. How much should I care? Does any of this matter, or is it just that I have a nostalgic longing for the good old days? Would discarding them equal the discarding of the value of my lesbian identity? I do have a clear vision for what I would like to do. The vision includes a close to my home local library archive where many of the more readily available volumes could be circulated to any woman or lesbian to borrow and read. The volumes that are unique, rare, or tender would stay archived in a location to be visible and enjoyed, but kept safe. It's a toss-up for what should happen to the many well-loved books that have my handwritten reflections and comments in the margins. The collection would become a cornerstone to a lesbian women's cultural center and makerspace, and community gathering space for enjoying, discussing, sharing, and appreciating lesbian and women's artistic life-affirming efforts. These publications not only encapsulate lesbian and feminist moments of history and culture, but they can continue to live and breathe to ignite, inspire, inform, involve, and transform those who read them. As we have always known, we will not be silenced, and our words are powerful. What happens to all this, Lesbiana? Are these volumes destined to be lost like so much of our past? Somehow this extensive collection of lesbian words, ideas, dare I say magic and vision, will be transferred. The questions are why and how and where. So it has been nearly 3 years since my original writing of this article, and much has developed since then. I actually am in the process of creating the Wanderground Lesbian Archive Library using my extension collection of some of the 3,500 publications and materials as a cornerstone. Actually, it's probably closer to 5,000 or so. It will be located in Rhode Island to serve the New England region and beyond. Last year, I received a 2-year individual grant from the Ella Lyman Cabot Trust Fund to catalog my collection, as well as to write and artistically create my lesbian memoir using this collection of publications, music, photographs, letters, and other articles gathered through the years. The grant allows me to purchase archival equipment such as boxes and technical equipment such as cataloging software and hardware. This past fall of 2022, Wanderground Lesbian Archive Library incorporated and received nonprofit status. We have a council and are currently engaged in strategic planning to acquire a permanent place to house the Wanderground, which currently lives in my home. We will create vibrant community gathering spaces to collect, preserve, and bring to life lesbian activisms, artistic cultural expressions, and forgotten legacies. We also have a small grant for a project called Strutting Our Stuff. Wanderground pops up around New England. During the spring of 2023, we will do a combination of pop-up events and formal presentations at various educational or community venues. This is a stopgap measure until we receive a permanent space. We encourage your participation in Wanderground, so please join our mailing list. I think all the contacts are going to be going into the chat. Volunteer to be a groundkeeper. We also take donations. And please, whatever you do, save your lesbian items to transfer to an archive near you. The mementos of your lesbian life are worth saving and interesting to other lesbians.
Thank you so much, Mev. I could not agree more. And then it looks like Sierra shared, if you're curious about how to get involved, there are some links in the chat. Thank you, Sierra, for posting those. And thanks for everyone for your comments. Okay, we are now going to move into what I'm calling kind of a roundtable dialogue, virtual dialogue on transfer with some of the featured contributors from the issue. I thought this format would be a really fun way to return to the moment of some of these conversations, some of them conducted years ago, with a more current reflection on transfer, collaboration, creativity, and other topics that come up in the conversation. I think it's a smaller world than we think, always in the best ways. Some of these folks have worked together in the past and have upcoming projects together, like Lukaza and Welly, who have 2 large-scale collaborative pieces from Welly's series, Shields for Queer Kin, What Does Support Look Like Now, and Protection, made with Amanda Crary in an upcoming exhibition in Albuquerque. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to quickly introduce all 5 of them now. You can read their full bios, which are in the physical issue itself and are going to be put into the Zoom chat now in case you're curious. So thank you to the Sinister Wisdom team for helping to get those in the chat. Start with Lukaza. Lukaza Branfman-Verissimo is an artist, activist, educator, storyteller, and curator whose creative practice involves recreating and retelling their personal tales and those of the people that surround them. Lukaza just opened Rituals Here, a show at the Center for Book Arts in New York, and will head southwest this spring as a visiting artist fellow with the University of New Mexico. And then Lynn Harris Ballen is the senior producer of Feminist Magazine, an intersectional radio show and podcast. Lynn has a deep community engagement focused practice and presence in Los Angeles and beyond as an LGBTQ and feminist cultural activist, passionate about telling untold stories and building coalitions. Camila Caddou works with and supports people in business coaching and equity consulting, virtual organization and assistance, and creativity coaching and support, including the Pause Project. Camila also creates and sells works of art and writes about equity and employee rights in the service industry, as well as sex, love, and relationships. Maddy Court is a writer, book author, zine maker, and a sharp queer cultural critic and voice from Wisconsin. You're likely following her on Instagram at Xena Warrior Princess. Even if you don't watch or haven't watched the new or original L Word, you should read her recaps and solid queer advice via her newsletter, TV Dinner, a queer advice column in Q&A format. Welly Fletcher is an artist and a faculty member at the University of New Mexico who makes objects that enact support. Collaboration is a frequent element in Welly's overall practice, often resulting in projects made with other artists and as objects that may require the viewer's participation to complete, exploring space as a literal manifestation of queer politics. What they share in common to me is the desire to transfer, connect, and build community in their creative projects and lives. They're going to each respond to a central question. What does transfer mean to them, to you, and why is it important? So we'll hear what they're up to now and what's next for their collaborations. And then at the end, we'll kind of have some free-flowing conversation based on everyone's thoughts and contributions. So we'll go in order. Take it away, Lukaza. What does transfer mean to you?
So much. So honored to be here and welcome this publication with so many important people in this Zoom room. I'm a little bit like blown away at the moment. I am thinking about transference. I have a history in printmaking and the world of language and archives as something that is just a material and tool that has rooted my practice for many years. And so I think when I hear the word transfer, I literally think about the ways that lesbian pamphlets and newsletters and archival documents have transferred our own kind of like mirrored images and identities, and also have preserved the ways that we think about this ever evolving legacy and history that we find ourselves in. I think in my offering to the publication, which is on the cover, I think a lot about kind of the transference of stories through letters, letter form, and also pattern, and how, yeah, I don't know, how do we like kind of like decode or also use codes found in patterns and language to transfer and kind of like leave our mark, our story and our identities marks on the world around us. How do we also get imprinted by others and learn of ourselves from our kin and community and collaborators? And so you know, I think very physically about transfer. And then I also think so much about transfer as this emotional transfer, as this movement transfer, as this way that we are kind of like always transferring to survive as lesbians, as non-binary folks, as folks living on many margins. So yeah, I'll start there.
Thank you, Lukaza. Okay, Lynn, what does transfer mean to you? And make sure you unmute.
I just did.
There we go. Thanks.
Yeah. I was really interested to read all the other pieces and see how sort of connective the themes were around change and radical connection. And collaboration, I think, was a biggie. And for me, the importance of transfer in the conversation that I have with Susannah, and it was years ago that we had this conversation, was it's about cross-generational engagement. The transfer is this concept, and I still don't have a word for it, how unlike in any other minority group, we're not born into queer families. If you're Black or Latinx, for example, you're born into a family who passes along a culture to you. They teach you how to survive oppression, the talk, for instance. But I feel deeply that we're the queer or lesbian parents or grandparents of next generations. And so we have to then pass on the stories. It's sort of a grandmothering of family stories. And so in the conversation with Susannah, we were talking about exhibits and conferences and a wall of lesbian publications, projects that I had been involved in with my late partner, who was the publisher of The Lesbian Tide. And we had a cross-generational relationship. So what I was doing was in some ways passing her history onto my generation. And now I'm becoming the melder. But I feel that in that sort of bringing material out of the archives and putting it into gorgeous visuals and interactive spaces, making it alive, it creates this, the liveliness of the transfer, and it makes it accessible. And also we then get back a conversation from the other generations. And certainly I feel in the 5 years since I had that conversation with Susannah, I would answer some of those questions differently now, because I feel like I've been learning in the conversations and the work that I've been doing. So this is Joan Nessel quote that we used in the One Archives Legacy Wall, the Voices from Lesbian Herstory. She says, "We need to know that we're not accidental, that our culture has grown and changed with the currents of time, that we have the story of a people to tell." And that's where I go back to every time, to keep passing that forward. We are a people. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, it's going back and reading and sort of like, it's like a visiting of a past self, but also like a recognition of like what is still kicking around and like relevant and important to you. And I really appreciate that you kind of went there with that. Camila, what does transfer mean to you?
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here and for having me in this roundtable discussion. I've been sitting with this question, what does transfer mean and why is it important to me? And I've been curious and exploring the intersection of transfer and narratives that don't belong to us, especially as people who hold marginalized identities, as a queer woman of color, noticing how much influence there is in my daily life, in terms of how I make choices for myself and how I move through the world with information that many times isn't mine. When Susannah and I spoke many years ago at this point as well, I was working on a project about employee rights. And in my work since then, I've started to parse through, the narratives and stories we tell ourselves, and how we can start to own our stories and our definitions of ourselves. I've also started to think about transfer. There's so many ways to look at it, but one way I've been looking at it is in a way of either being present with your present moment or not trusting your current moment, taking yourself out of what is in front of you, and projecting other information onto the current moment. So that's kind of my current obsession, and that's where my work is taking me right now with the question of transfer. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Camila. I I need to do one of your workshops because I absolutely need help coming up with ways to be present in the current moment.
I would love to have you.
I'm going to make that happen. So thank you so much. Maddy, what does transfer mean to you?
Yeah, that's such a cool question. And I don't think that I had thought of like lesbian community or exchanging things in a lot of depth before I was asked to be in the issue. But basically I made like print physical zines for a long time, which was a project that I would send them through the mail and advertise them on social media. So it was like kind of a weird hybrid of like doing this like print retrograde activity. But then the reason that it found an audience was really through Instagram. But like really since the pandemic, my bread and butter has been a newsletter that I write called TV Dinner. And most of that content is that I write an advice column for queer people. And I guess when I think about like advice columns, which were traditionally like written by women, often under a pseudonym, and really considered this kind of like throwaway form, often about housework or, but now like, especially with like the advent of the internet, like so many queer people write advice columns, so many people who like maybe shouldn't have advice columns. It just feels like something that so many people are doing right now, which is really great. And it's proved to be so adaptable. And then also when I think about transfer in my life and work is something that I think like most people subscribe to my newsletter for is I recap the L Word Gen Q, which is a lot of work because it's a show that like doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not very well written. So often watching it and like essentially like blogging it and having people respond, it feels like we're all like comparing notes across the country and like trying to figure out what happens. And you don't want to just say that something's bad without like providing a lot of evidence. Or you don't want to say that something makes you angry without like giving a list of reasons. As a good lesbian, you have to like give examples. So like facilitating that community, it has been like, I guess, yeah, like ultimately joyful for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Maddy.
Thank you.
Yeah, the newsletters, and if you don't subscribe, you should. And there's a paid version as well that you should pay for it if you can. It's like a support group, I feel like, to deal with you know, as someone who watched the original L Word live, not to go down an L Word spiral right now, but like speaking of transfer, like having that like memory and like what that like cultural production, like the space that occupied, and now having it kind of be resurrected in this way, like a second go around, and like, yeah, just like having a space to kind of hold that and talk about it, I think is really cool. So thank you for your work and emotional labor.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welly, hello. What does transfer mean to you?
Hey, thank you, Susannah, for the interview and inviting me to the roundtable. Thank you, Sinister Wisdom. This is super exciting, and what an amazing crew of people in here. So I have also been sitting with the question since you kind of wrote that this would be the question, what does transfer mean to you? And I was really thinking about why is it important? And for me right now, 2023, I'm thinking of that word in my artwork. And for those of you who don't know me, I make sculpture, and materiality is really important to me. Presence of an object as sort of this other in the room that is unspeaking in material and form. I think there's sort of an inherent queerness in experience of art where you're asked to encounter a presence. And it doesn't explain itself. And I loved thinking of the word transfer as that experience. I often use the word like impact or transformation or, you know, learning from or affected by, but transfer seems like such a great way to describe what I would hope and aim for my work, and how it would impact, you know, the different ways it would impact different people. So right now I'm thinking about transfer in work through poetics. I'm really hoping for depth and layers, the way a poem kind of layers upon itself. And your first read through, there's one transfer, and then your second read through, maybe there's another one, and then there's another one, and there's another one. Just the way, multiple engagements with any presence of a person or an animal or whoever your kin are, kind of offer that transfer of whatever it is. And so in thinking about what my kind of next decades of work, what I really hope happens is this trusting of intuition and life experience and the things I'm reading, the people I'm talking to, and the exchanges I'm having in the classroom as a teacher that are very extroverted and exciting and reciprocal. And then really showing up in the studio and having freedom and play for that to transfer through me into the work, and then have its own kind of ongoing transfer out to that work in the world when I'm not around. So I think art speaks in a language that's really unique, and it is a rare thing that we just kind of shut up and look and experience with our bodies and take what's there. And I think it makes us listen and receive. And I think that's why it's important right now. I think it's something we're really hungry for in the world. And it's something that sculpture in particular, I think, as challenging as it is, can offer. So those were my thoughts in 2023, a little different than when we talked a few years ago, where I was really thinking a lot about the classroom, but yeah.
Thank you, Welly. Yeah, and thinking about the classroom and thinking about, I think a lot about in all of our conversations with everyone here in this roundtable, sustaining it. And I guess I'm curious, what has maybe shifted for you, in terms of, and I guess this is a direct question for you, Welly, in terms of the space of creating and carving out that time and balancing that, going from work to creative space, and you could call it just context switching, going between those spaces. And I'd pose that to everyone, but we can start with you.
Yeah, I'll answer briefly. I was thinking about that in this context of, I think a lot has changed. When we spoke, it was really the depth of the shakeup of COVID. And I was spending a lot of energy and caring for my community at the time, which really was this new community at the University of New Mexico with my students. And there's so much two-way transfer in a classroom, that it's so reciprocal. There's things and knowledge I have and skills that potentially are useful, but I'm learning so much from the students. But it's really changed what I need and what I think my studio practice and the objects I'm making in my studio, it's kind of refined what I think they can do and need to do, because of the collaborative environment and extroverted and the particular invigoration of a classroom environment. I think that's where there's a different kind of language that happens in art making. And that's what I'm really kind of keen into. And I feel like over the years since I spoke to you, that's become more and more clear of what this can do that is different than that, or even that's different than collaborative artworks I've been making, like Lukaza and mine, that will be shown later. That was so much a need for ongoing year-long conversation about what does support look like right now, and so that was so sort of active and collaborative. And so yeah, that's how it's changed.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to piggyback on that or have something to add? on that idea of like sustainability, maybe what's like changed for I know we talked about like everyone's practices and like what they're up to now, but is there anything that's changed in terms of the way that you're framing it, or I guess we could call it like a learning unlearning? I'm thinking too, Camila, about what you shared about passing on stories and like the space of the internet and like social media and like the sharing and resharing, and like I like that you sort of are critical of that. Do you want to say more?
Sure. I mean, I was just actually thinking about what we spoke about in 2020, also in terms of at the time I was working on a project around employing or supporting healthy employment environments for copy professionals and service industry workers. And though my work has gone from that kind of environment and has dovetailed into facilitation and space holding. And yeah, I'm so curious about how we share our stories and our narratives in the workplace or within close-knit communities. And I see a lot of, the space of the internet and the way we've been using the internet since the beginning of the pandemic and creating environments such as these that are community spaces and how we share in these spaces. The evolution has so deeply impacted my work and how people show up for each other and how much vulnerability there can be in a space like this. And I think the evolution of that is extremely expansive. It kind of like opens up the conversation to be so much more accessible in some ways. So I'd say that that's partially how it's evolved. Yeah.
Thank you. Did anyone have anything anyone want to riff off that or piggyback on that? I don't want to just like pepper everyone with questions if there's thoughts lingering out there.
Yeah, I think in relation to what both Welly and Camila were saying about that they did their interviews with you during the lockdown year, I feel that it's been really interesting to see the shift in community collaboration that's happened as we've sort of come back out of that. And in this last year, in 2022, I was the chair of Dyke Day LA, which is this sort of huge gathering. It's when you try and explain it to people who don't know, it's like, well, it's a picnic, but it's so much more. It's, thousands of dykes in this non-commercial, no cops, completely DIY space for a day. And it's like this magical day. But there was this kind of, I felt like a reaction where we all had this deep hunger to be together. And luckily it was outdoors, so it was a safer space to be together. And the rebuilding of a new group, again, a cross-generational group to work together and make this happen was like one of the great joys of my life last year. And I didn't expect that. I think it was, it was incredibly stressful, but it was really something that it was bringing in. It's a form of activism, I feel, but also recreating community and reminding ourselves that we stayed connected online, but at the same time, there's this really sort of feeling, it's a multi-sensory feeling of being together with each other, not in a bar, not in any of those kind of spaces, but just like almost a giant family reunion. And that was a mirroring of prior collaborative work that we had done in sort of more formal spaces, in creating groups to do exhibits or other things. This was just joy, and we all needed it. We really needed it.
Yeah.
I'll jump in.
Please.
I think I'm thinking about what has changed. So much has changed and is always changing as porous sponge bodies in this world. And I've been kind of doing a lot of research and focusing some of my kind of like changing work these days around like the patterns and structures that keep us together. Like kind of examining like what are the ways that we stay together. And I think in many ways that was inspired by this lack of being physically together, but this kind of like always trusting that we have the tools that we need to like be together in emotional or intellectual or sexual or kinship forms. And this kind of like digging back to like what does a web look like, and how am I enacting or practicing being a web keeper or a tender to all these facets of one's life. I talked a little bit in the first question about like patterns and forms other than language that tell our stories. So thinking about, what do roots look like? How do we embody past, present, future root making as an artist, as an activist, as an educator, as a learner, as a listener. Just like this moment of mass transition of really trying to figure out how these patterns and tools and forms are here to kind of like remind us or let us lay back on a web or a hammock of support that we do have, especially in moments when it's not safe and continues to not be safe to be together. Just kind of like trying to get my hands on as many digital copies and formats of magazines and archives, and kind of like just learning of our place in this ecosystem. So I've been thinking a lot about what this kind of mass collective work and also our own kind of like interpersonal connection to this moment that we're in.
I really resonate with this idea of being like a web keeper. And I think too of even the work that you included, Lukaza, in a show that I worked on in Oakland, California in 2018 called Political Birthdays, which, speaking of connections, was inspired by a quote by Lynn's late partner, Jean Cordova, on the moment of like, coming into being, realizing who she was, and like having this political birthday. And I think about the work around like bringing people together, and a lot of that work, Lukaza, in the show that's in this, there's photos of that installation if you're curious in the issue, was like thinking about like bringing people together for like celebrations and ceremonies and like almost like commemorations of deaths, but also like life, and like coming together and kind of like the joy and the collaboration as resistance. As you head to New Mexico, how are you thinking about web keeping?
It feels like a newer role that I've kind of given myself, although I feel like I have been an organizer and bridger in many different spaces and aspects of my life for a long time, and is one of my deepest joys of holding that practice. I don't know, I think right now of it feels kind of like this expansive role, and also as I start using WebKeeper, more and more people are like, I'm a WebKeeper of like my world or my community or my neighborhood. And maybe at the end of the day, like the WebKeeper is like the transfer of all these parts of our communities and histories that we know or don't know or are learning of. So yeah, I'm really excited to yeah, I have a list of things that I am hoping to work on this spring. And I'm also really excited to learn from a new place and learn from folks that are doing organizing work in New Mexico, and just always thinking about how do we like get bigger, and yeah, how can we listen and do that work of centering these histories wherever we go. So I'm honored and excited, and so feel so lucky to have like this table, an imaginary virtual table that we're all sitting at or laying on together, as a part of kind of like a web and spaces and people that I now carry with me too.
I love that. Heart emoji. Well, I know we just have a few minutes. Maybe just quickly, I'd love to hear, and I'm sure everyone else would, like, what's one thing you're looking forward to? It could be a personal project, something you're working on, someone else's work that you're excited about. Let's go.
Are you opening that up to everyone, Suzanne? Because this is
Oh,
Mev.
sorry. To our speakers.
Okay.
I'm happy to kick us off. I didn't know if we were going to go in alphabetical order, but I'm happy
No,
to.
it's a free form. Whoever had something to contribute, I didn't want to call on anyone.
Totally. So in keeping with my obsession with narratives and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and to others, I'm really excited about this project. I'm starting a workshop that starts tomorrow called The Pivot. It's about changing your mind and taking a week to do so, and about holding community space to see how we grow and shift perspectives with support from each other. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, lost my mute button. Thank you. How can people get involved if they want to learn more?
Definitely. I can pop my website in the chat box, and you can sign up there if you're interested in joining. You can also reach out just through the contact information on there.
Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else, I just wanted to say thank you for being available. Thank you to our featured speakers. This was wonderful. I just think it's so special to get together and like revisit these conversations, hear what you're up to now. And I just really appreciate your vision and perspective and time and energy. So thank you. Julie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you all so much. And I'll say for the panel and to Mev, one of the things that often comes out of a Sinister Wisdom issue is ideas for other issues that help us think more sharply together and move different issues forward. So if that was prompted for anyone on the panel or contributing to the issue, I would be delighted to talk with you about that. Also, in the spirit of things coming up, I do want to invite everyone to join us on February 21st at 7 p.m. We're doing a special roundtable conversation that builds on some of the art themes that are in the transfer issue, And the subject of the roundtable conversation is what makes lesbian art lesbian? And Belle Pitkin, a young artist, has convened together a group of people. It will also be a roundtable like this evening, and we'll be thinking and looking at different art images and asking what makes lesbian art lesbian. We also have two special co-sponsored events coming up on February 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be in conversation with Irina Klepfish about her new book, Her Birth and Later Years, in conjunction with Workers' Circle. And on March 2nd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. also on Zoom, co-sponsored by Karis Books and More. I'll be in conversation with LaShonda Mims about her book, Drastic Dykes and Accidental Activists, which is about lesbian organizing in the South. Information about all of these events is available at sinisterwisdom.org/events. So I hope you'll join us for these events and read folks' books. I obviously obviously have a busy month of reading ahead of me. As I said at the top of the hour, the video from tonight's event will be made available at the Sinister Wisdom website tomorrow or Thursday. That link is going into the chat, and it's sinisterwisdom.org/SW127. I've already said check out sinisterwisdom.org/events for more information about upcoming events that we have, including our next issue launch, which will be in April.